Is the Victorian government about to approve a new coal project? It is crunch time for the Japanese HESC project, which has now completed the pilot that it started in 2018. This coal project turns brown coal from Loy Yang A in the Latrobe Valley into brown hydrogen, which is then transported over to the port of Hastings, liquefied, and then shipped off to Japan, who pretend it's clean because Victoria is left with ownership of all the emissions. There was a joint pilot funded in 2018 with the Federal Coalition Government and the Victorian Labor Government throwing in $50 million each to get in on this project with well-known environmentalists like Shell and AGL. 5 years later, that pilot's been completed and Japan wants to scale up and go commercial, as does the Victorian Labor Treasurer Tim Pallas, who flew over there to tell them. But before we talk about the politics, let's just point out a few little details from this pilot venture. Despite Malcolm Turnbull and Angus Taylor grinning like kids on Christmas, the HESC pilot was supposed to produce 2.6 tonnes of hydrogen to go in this fancy new fossil fuel-powered ship. But the ship left the port of Hastings with only 1 tonne of HESC-produced brown hydrogen. They had to purchase the other 1.6 from another company who make their hydrogen out of gas. And there was a, what do you call it? Fire on the ship as well, which is always fun. Now the Victorian Treasurer wants to scale things up. The commercial-sized HESC project, according to a paper by the Australia Institute, would add between 2.9 and 3.8 million tonnes of CO2 into the atmosphere each year, which is the equivalent of adding between 550,000 and 735,000 cars to the road annually. And of course, the only plan to address these emissions is through carbon capture and storage, the technology which has never worked at scale and likely never will. This is the local federal MP Russell Broadbent literally admitting this to me after signing up for the pilot project.
I don't know anywhere where there's carbon capture and storage working. Yes, as Alan said, reductions in emissions by altering the way we do the power plants, but I don't know where there's carbon and capture storage working.
I know that it's featuring in your net zero modelling though, so if it doesn't actually exist anywhere in the world, how are you going to achieve net zero?
I'll take that as a comment, Matt. Thank you.
So what the hell are we considering this for? Well, Japan wants hydrogen. Like, really, really wants hydrogen. Japan's really putting all their eggs into one basket at the moment when it comes to energy. Unfortunately for them, it's going to be quite difficult for them to become self-sufficient, as their ability to scale up renewables is pretty limited. And a huge chunk of their economic prosperity is reliant on the car manufacturing industry, which around the world is rapidly switching to EVs. So Japan is going hard on the hydrogen. The Japanese government's even subsidizing hydrogen-fueled vehicles to try and compete with EVs. Japan's doing some pretty good work in the clean hydrogen space. They're trying to produce as much as they can through some pretty innovative measures like biogas. But at the end of the day, they need way more than they can produce. So they're looking for international options. At the moment, they use China, the US, Germany, and Vietnam as their main sources of import. For Australia, yeah, look, hydrogen export is an option. It's pretty inefficient to convert energy to hydrogen, and we absolutely must decarbonise and electrify our domestic economy first. But if we scale up renewable capacity beyond what's needed in Australia, yeah, exporting green hydrogen could be viable. But that's not what this is, like, at all. The HESC project is a coal project, and the difference in emissions between burning brown coal and gasification is negligible. The HESC project wouldn't even begin until next decade, and by that time the Latrobe Valley realistically will have well and truly moved out of coal. This is a really bad idea. It's not clean hydrogen, it's unabated fossil fuel produced hydrogen with a little bit of greenwashing. What the Latrobe Valley and the Victorian government need to be doing is scaling up renewables in the valley as quickly as possible, providing workers with a just transition plan, and then we can start talking about green hydrogen as an export opportunity. We're in a climate emergency and the HESC project would be pouring more petrol on the fire. So how do we stop it? Unfortunately, this doesn't require legislation in the Victorian Parliament. Labor's Environment Minister Lily D'Ambrosio has the power to approve or reject this project, and the Treasurer is all for it.
We need to develop a supply chain.
The way we're going to stop this is through community pressure. As a Gippslander, I know how hard our communities are working to move into a clean energy future. We can't risk setbacks like this, and we can't afford shiny new pipe dream distractions like carbon capture and storage. There is a way to force debate on this in the Victorian Upper House. If a petition reaches 10,000 signatures and gets presented, they have to debate it. So, Friends of the Earth have launched one, and the Victorian Greens will present it to Parliament as soon as it hits 10,000 signatures. So share it around. We're in a climate emergency. Opening up a new coal project by stealth is criminal.